Oh, I got to do that same thing.
Hold on.
It says it's streaming live on Facebook right now.
Setting up your meeting for Facebook Live. So there's that time lag that needs to happen.
Okay. So I can see up here on the left of my screen, it says
Yeah.
live on Facebook, and it says meeting is now streaming live on Facebook.
There you go. Look at that.
So you think we're being recording right now? So should we start or what?
Hold on. I don't see it yet.
Do you see the same thing, Rachel?
Yes.
Upper left, yeah. Now it says live on Facebook.
Yep.
It is? Okay. Well, I guess my computer is a little slow, but we'll go ahead and start.
It's 1:59 if you want to wait till 2 o'clock. There we go. It's 2 o'clock.
Oh. Hi, Miss
Okay.
Rachel. How are you?
Hi, good.
Good. And Marie, it's so nice to do this again.
Yes. How are
Well,
you, Fred?
Last time we were in the studio, so it was a little more intimate, if you get the drift of that. But this is still very nice.
Yes, and I think this is an incredible opportunity for people to learn about real estate contracts and especially title insurance. That's where you come in, Fred. And so to start with, Fred, give us a little bit of overview of your background
Okay.
and your experience on title, and then we'll go to Rachel, okay?
Sure. So I worked for Dun & Bradstreet. I worked ever since I was 14 years old, believe it or not. I went down and became a Navy pilot, stayed in the Navy for 22 years, retired in 1992. And I've been with Chicago Title for 27 years. So
27 years, that's a long time.
same company, which I'm very proud of. That doesn't happen a lot in my industry. And I plan on working as long as I can. So I enjoy the work. I get asked all kinds of questions by all sorts of people on various topics, Mills Act and Prop 60. And I try to give creative ideas. Title insurance is really kind of a very misunderstood thing. Most people don't know anything about it. The only time they run across it is when somebody tells them they have to use it. Right, Rachel?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Rachel, please introduce yourself to everyone. I know we had our last Zoom call, but for the new ones that are watching, please let them know what your background is.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel LaMar. I am a real estate broker and owner of LaMar Real Estate. I'm also a licensed California attorney. And I'm excited to share any knowledge I can to help people get through a real estate transaction. There's so much legalese and so much that people don't understand. So it's always nice to try to ease the burden a little bit.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, I agree. Rachel, before we get started, tell me what you think about this, because I've often wondered, the real estate contracts have gotten so lengthy, correct? With
Yeah.
so many pages. And I know there was a lawsuit years ago where somebody claimed that they weren't explained in enough time. There wasn't enough time to go through all of those pages with sufficient clarity. And they won this lawsuit because they said, hey, my agent just handed me the papers, but didn't go through any of this stuff with me. So I was curious what you thought about that.
Well, so the thing is I always tell clients to read through all the documents, and I explain to them that there will undoubtedly be some things they don't understand. And what is important for real estate agents, because to avoid the unauthorized practice of law, that if they have to tell all their clients, when you're looking through these documents, whatever you don't understand, make a list. And if it's not something simple, like what does this mean? If it's a legal question, you have to tell them to consult an attorney. So they are very lengthy, and a lot of the forms will repeat some of the same things as other forms, and it's all just, attorneys like to do that to prevent any kind of liability. So anytime there's a lawsuit, then more language is usually going to get inserted into the contract next time they update it. But
it's just a thought, and I find this to be very useful for real estate agents. But I think if an agent didn't know what I'm going to say, I encourage buyers to ask for a sample copy of the entire purchase agreement and give one of those same ones to the seller, because the seller's going to have plenty of time if he signed listing documents, correct? Listing agreement. But if he's handed a buyer's, an offer to purchase but hasn't looked at it before, that can be a little problematic. So I think the smartest way is have a sample contract. If you're working with the buyer, give that to the buyer. If the buyer's, should ask their agent, can I have a sample contract so I can read it through before we make that offer? I think that's
Sure.
smart.
Sure.
Well,
yeah.
that's awesome. So let's make sure that the audience know what we're doing here. So just for everyone, my name is Marie Waite. I am the founder and the CEO of The Finest Women in Real Estate. And this show is about educating all of you in real estate and all related matters of buying or selling homes. And Rachel is here. She is a real estate broker, amazing experience, and she has a lot of experience on reading contracts, having the law degree also. It's a combination of real estate and legal. It's such a great asset for you to be able to benefit from that. And of course, we have Fred. Fred is, 27 years as being a title rep. I mean, I'm sure you have tons and tons of stories to share to people in regards to how you can protect yourself when it comes to your buying and selling homes.
Well,
Yeah.
Marie, is when I first got into business, I realized that the title policy that was recommended, and I didn't know anything about title insurance, by the agent that I had used turned out to be completely worthless. So I was able to get a policy from Chicago Title without any cost, but otherwise I would have been really without title insurance. It's pretty interesting. So I did learn a lot over those years.
Awesome. So we're going to take this opportunity. We do have about a half an hour for this session or meeting, and we're going to go ahead and start with Rachel. Rachel, in regards to real estate contract, I do have a question for you, and I'm going to go ahead and just read it to you real quick. This is more of a seller's question. How do I know if I have to disclose something? Or do you want to address this question? Or do you want to do a presentation first?
Yeah, I have a little presentation that, so I'd love to maybe address that after, if that's possible.
Yes, I think that would be perfect.
Okay, so what I'm talking about today is the responsibilities and potential liabilities under the California Residential Purchase Agreement, which is the offer. And so every party that signs and every party that's involved with the contract has certain responsibilities. And if those are not done to in the right way, the person can be held liable. So of course, we don't have enough time today to go into all of the potential responsibilities and liabilities. And it's very important to keep in mind that I'm focusing on the California Residential Purchase Agreement because some states have completely different offers. So I can't really speak to those, but it's very important to keep in mind that every contract is different, because if you are a buyer and you are writing an offer on a home, you can put different terms in the contract. You can shorten periods. You can do all kinds of things. So it's important to remember that, not every contract is the same. You need to read your contract. You need to speak to your agent, and you need to understand what your responsibilities and liabilities are. But what I did is I went through the contract and I just took kind of like the more basic responsibilities that are pretty obvious within the document. And again, there could be more, so that's why you want to make sure you connect with your agent. And I'm going to just go through those today. So I have a little thing here, which will just take a few minutes. Hold on one second.
While you're doing that, I'm going to just get a quick glass of water.
Okay. And now I can't find it, Marie. It's not working. Okay, hold on. Well, we may not be able to do this because it isn't working. I don't know why.
So do you have the share?
Yeah, let me just open it. Let me try this again like we did last time. Okay. Sorry.
That's
Sorry,
okay.
guys.
Take your time.
Okay, let's try this one more time. Oh, it's just not even showing up. I don't understand why.
Is it because maybe we're live on Facebook?
Maybe that's why. Well, great.
Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try and share. Let me see if I can do the share to your.
Well, I have it right here. I can hold it up.
Okay, let's do that.
I can hold it up, but then I can't look at it. That's the only thing. Okay. Okay. So the first person I'm going to talk about is the seller responsibilities and liabilities.
I can read that.
You can see that? Okay.
Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to highlight you as spotlight video. Okay.
Okay.
There you go.
Ooh, baby. There we go. Okay. So
looks good.
The first thing that a seller is responsible for are the seller disclosures. Okay. And this is the most important thing I'm going to put this down for a minute while I talk about this. In the real estate, in a real estate transaction, as everyone who's been through one knows. So you as a seller have to disclose certain things about the home and to the buyer. And there's all kinds of forms. There's two main forms that you have to fill out. One is called the transfer disclosure statement and one is called the seller property questionnaire. And they ask a series of questions. Some are just checking yes and no, and some are actually questions. Have there been any claims, insurance claims in the last 5 years? Has anyone died in the home in the last 3 years? All kinds of questions. Are there any title issues you know of, any HOA issues you're aware of? And you have to fill this out to the best of your ability. If you know of anything that's happened to the home or in the home, or any repairs, any floods, any leaks, anything like that, you need to disclose. And you always want to over disclose rather than under disclose. And if you're not sure about what to disclose, you definitely want to talk to your agent, and you may need to even talk to an attorney. So, and there's some other examples on here about other disclosures that are provided to the buyer that are not ones you fill out, but that are ordered by the escrow or your agent, like the natural hazard disclosure, lead disclosure if there's lead paint in the house, taxes, and things like that. Next is you have to be responsible to provide access to the buyer to the property during the investigatory period. Under the contract in California, it's 17 days unless that time period is altered. So you want to be, if you have dogs or you have a baby that sleeps during the day or someone who works, graveyard hours, you have to make sure that you can accommodate the buyers to get in there with their inspectors and whatnot. And then also the seller is usually responsible for paying for certain things under the contract. This can vary from state to state, also from county to county. Here in Southern California, the seller usually pays for transfer taxes, HOA transfers, and the title insurance for the buyer. And again, any of those things can be altered within the contract, so you need to understand what you're responsible for in your particular contract. And then the last thing that the seller pays for is usually the buyer home warranty for 1 year, unless that is waived. Okay, so those are just typical seller responsibilities, any of which if you do some, the main thing is the disclosures. If you don't fill them out properly, you can be subject to liability and a lawsuit, not just after you close, but even years later. So it's really important to over disclose, not under disclose. And then we get to the buyer responsibilities and liabilities. And the first one is to get your initial deposit into escrow on time. Once your contract is accepted, you have 3 days to get into escrow. So there's different ways to do that, and your agent will tell you how, but really important because escrow isn't officially opened until they have A, the contract, and B, your initial deposit. So then they can start ordering everything else and get moving. Then you want to make sure as the buyer to meet all deadlines, your investigation, your loan, your appraisal deadline, and any other contingencies you may have. There are time periods specified in the contract that you need to abide by, otherwise you'll be found to be in breach of contract. And in that situation, the seller can issue you a notice to perform. And if you don't, meaning remove that, then the seller can cancel the contract. So you want to really make sure to stick to all your timelines and be connected with your agent to know when those are due. And then you want to also wire your down payment monies on time prior to closing, which escrow will tell you exactly how much and how. And you want to be able to negotiate with your agent's help on repairs, appraisal issues, price adjustments, and other things. And again, you don't do the negotiating, your agent does, but of course you want to let the agent know what you want to negotiate and make a plan so that you can get the best results. And then we go to the responsibilities of the agents. Now, I feel that this is a topic that there's a lot of abuse in the profession with agent responsibilities, and there are a lot of lawsuits based on agents not doing things properly. And either it's due to negligence or failure to disclose on the agent's behalf as well. There was just a huge lawsuit about failure to disclose because some agents didn't do that. So the listing agent responsibilities, and again, these are just kind of in a nutshell. There are many, many more, but these are the basic, most important. The fiduciary duty to the seller. You obviously owe a duty of care, of honesty, of integrity. You are representing that seller to the best of your ability. So you have to be professional. You also have to disclose any known material facts that you are aware of. So for example, let's say a seller didn't put in their disclosures that they had a leak and you know that there was a leak, you have to put that in your disclosures. Otherwise, you can be liable. So anything you know, potential liability. If you know about it, you want to disclose it rather than get sued. And you have to be able to negotiate on behalf of the seller. And also, this is really important, communicate with all the parties involved. This is also something that we see a lot of problems with in some transactions, because there's the selling agent, there's escrow, there's title officer, the loan officer, processor. All those people have to be on the same page in order for the sale to go through to closing. So if you're just checking out and on vacation, or you're not around, you're not answering calls, and there's going to be problems, you're not going to close on time, and then there can be liability. So, and then be available for questions or help. So those are some of the listing agent responsibilities and potential liabilities. And then lastly, we have the buyer agent. Same kind of thing. The buyer's agent, it was a fiduciary duty to the buyer, which is to be honest, have integrity, be professional, etc. It's super important as a buyer's agent to provide a schedule to your buyer at the very beginning of escrow. What I do is I send out a little calendar, and it's all highlighted in yellow, and it has the dates that the contingencies need to be removed, the dates of deposit need to be in, the date of the home inspection, anything that you know of at that point that's going to go on during this escrow. You need to give that to the buyer and tell them, print this out, tack it up somewhere, put it on your phone, whatever, so that you know these are your deadlines. Because it's really important. If you don't, like I said, meet those deadlines, you can be in breach of contract. And then review disclosures and paperwork with the clients, schedule inspections, investigations, appointments, anything like that needs to be done. Negotiate repairs and credits, be present for the final walkthrough prior to closing to make sure everything looks like it did when your buyers made their offer. And then again, communicate with all the parties involved in the transaction. So it's super important. Everybody has lots of responsibilities that can lead to liabilities, but it's super important that everybody stays on track and makes sure that they complete everything prior to the deadline or the day of the deadline. And that's pretty much it that I have in a nutshell. So if there's any questions, we can.
Well, so
Okay.
I'll ask one.
Okay.
What dual agency? Is it still around? What's your take on that?
Yeah, we just had a call about that last month, Marie, or 2 months ago. Can't remember. And
Yes,
yeah,
it was last month.
Yeah, we had a call about that, and just to make it really short, because people can go back and watch that. But I think that dual agency creates a lot of problems, and that's one of the reasons we see a lot of lawsuits, because in a sentence, basically, if you are representing one party and their interests, how could you be representing the opposing party and their interests?
Right.
It just doesn't work. And it's like I said in the other call, that if you were being sued by somebody, you wouldn't go hire that person's attorney to represent you. I mean, legally lawyers can't do that, but it's kind of that same thing. You can only be a fiduciary to a party and their interests. You can't be a fiduciary to an opposing party as well. It just doesn't make any sense. Someone's going to get not be taken care of in that situation.
I think it's smart to separate them. I know in some states, I believe it's illegal to have.
In 8 states. Yeah.
So here, my recommendation would be, and I'll just cover a little bit with title insurance because it's an important part of this also. But I would say a buyer has the right to choose whatever title company wants, but I think that choice needs to be made with some semblance of knowledge, because it is an insurance policy. It's promoted probably as a service to the agents. That's how I think a lot of agents look at it, as a service. But really, it's a title insurance policy that benefits you way down in the future. As I mentioned, the one that I had in my house back in 1984 turned out to be completely worthless. I could have probably sued the agent back then because I think he wrote in just any reliable. There was no knowledge of the different financial strength. So I tell the buyers, be a little bit aware of a title insurance company and their financial strength. And remember that when you're dealing with title agents, those would be typically companies that are owned by brokers. Say Coldwell Banker has their title company, Berkshire Hathaway has a title company, and those typically are title agencies, not title insurance companies. And I think the most important part of that for a buyer is that company, that agency, if it's not a title insurance company like Chicago Title, is not the one to pay a claim. If there is a claim down the road, they're going to have to go to whoever that underwriter for that policy is. And many times it's a small company, maybe it's a small national company, but a very small company. And that's where I believe the financial strength comes into play. People should always ask that. And if it is a title company that's recommended by a broker that's and they own it, they do have a disclosure. They have a disclosure that says, it's affiliated business relationships. But again, my advice to a buyer is keep that separate. Do your own research. You can call me anytime. You can call people that are knowledgeable and ask their opinion about why should I use this title company. And again, service is one thing, but claims paying ability is of the utmost consequences. And I think the other important part is sellers need to realize that they typically in Southern California are paying for the title insurance policy that the buyer will get as their final policy, homeowner's policy, if you will. But the buyer will also, if there's a loan involved, will typically pay for a title insurance policy that benefits the lender. So remember, the one that the buyer typically pays for is not the one that they're given. That's not a buyer's policy. So it's, in my opinion, it's important for sellers also to look and know that the company that they're saying, I want this title company to do it, is, has the assets to back up a claim if there should be one. And claims do happen, believe me. There have been plenty of claims that I personally have had to be involved in, and some went in favor of the consumer, some didn't, because some were, they were not legitimate claims. However, I think that's extremely important. I also mentioned earlier that you should ask if there are Western regional exceptions in your policy, because if they are, and not every policy has them. We have our homeowner's policy. We do not have those. So if you're buying a property and you're going to live in the property, you're going to get what's called a homeowner's title insurance policy. Best form. All the title companies have that same policy form. So, but if there are Western regional exceptions in that policy, then they might take away some of those benefits. So I encourage you to make sure if you are buying a home that you're getting the best policy available, which is the homeowner's policy of title insurance, and make sure it's from a reputable company. I'll stop there a little bit, and there's probably some questions.
Okay, let me get back to asking the question for Rachel. This is a seller's question, and here's a question. How do I know if I have to disclose something?
Yeah, so like I said, I mean, this is so important. If there's actually a form for agents called the DIA, which is the Disclosure Information Advisory. And typically when you're trained as a real estate agent, most brokers don't advise that you use that. But I actually just recently started using that because it really goes into detail on explaining how the disclosures need to be filled out correctly. So one thing I would do if you're an agent is give this form to your clients to sign and tell them to read it before they fill out the disclosures. And secondly, if you're a seller and you're filling out the disclosures and you have any questions, you ask your agent. Obviously, if it's a legal question, they can go to the broker or maybe get an attorney involved, but always ask questions. And like I said, it's always best to over disclose. If you know that there was a problem in the home, if you're aware of it, you have to disclose it. The disclosures say if you have knowledge of something, you need to disclose it. So you can always attach an extra paper. And if you had, let's say, a leak and you had mold remediation and you have all the clearances from a certified company, you attach those with your disclosure. So just read through the disclosures, read through disclosure information advisory as to how to fill it out, and ask your agent any questions you may have. And remember to always disclose anything you know.
Okay.
So if I can weigh in
Yeah.
on one of these, Rachel and Marie, years ago when I was selling a property, that property was located in Coronado, but directly across from the naval base. So you could see from my house, you could see the nuclear carriers that were there. And when I sold that house, I made a point of saying that, my house was within, and I can't remember what the, distance was within like an eighth of a mile of occasionally nuclear powered carriers. And I don't know if it was needed, but I felt it was important. So I think it highlights, to me, it was something that I knew that I want to make sure that somebody who was buying, who was not military, with a military background, would find out like, wow, I'm close to a nuclear carrier, and maybe that's not a good thing.
Yeah. That's a great point. I think when you're going through the disclosures as a seller, they ask specific questions like, are you aware of any, insurance claims? Are you aware of any deaths on the property? Has there been any remodeling, paintings, yada, yada, yada in the last year? Things like that. So you don't have to search your brain and say, when I bought this house 20 years ago, this happened. If you remember it, great, but you just kind of go through the process of looking through these questions and it'll direct you, are you aware of any plumbing issues? Are you aware of this or that? And so you want to just, if you are aware and you remember, I mean, there may be some things you don't remember from 20, 30 years ago, but if you do, then it's better to put them down.
Yeah.
So the disclosures that the seller has to that they're responsible for is mostly attached to the physical of the house.
Mostly the ones that
Okay.
the seller fills out themselves, yes.
Okay, but for the title report, Fred,
Yes.
what are the things that they need to really watch out, where they need to include that as part of the disclosure?
So great point. And I point out two things that are very important. One is that when we are tasked by escrows, typically by escrow, although I've been encouraging my listing agents to get a prelim title report started when they take the listing, correct? So that we have plenty of time to find things. But typically what happens, and it's an unfortunate portion of it, only after escrow's opened and towards, I'd say not the first thing, they'll open escrow and the escrow officer will then open title. So now it's a few days into the transaction, and then it might take 3 or 4 days to get the preliminary title report back. In the meantime, the buyer is going to be asked to fill out what's called a statement of information, statement of identity. Once that, and only once that is brought back to us, and that has driver's license, maybe social security number, prior marriages, and so forth, then we will run what's called a general index search, looking for suits, judgments, liens, taxes that were not being paid, other owners of the property. And so what happens then is we issue an updated prelim if we find any of those things. So a buyer might have looked at the prelim when they first got it, but now there's an update to it that they should also look at because there might be some changes to it.
So so the preliminary report, is it sent to the buyer or to the agent of the buyer?
It's usually sent to escrow, and then escrow directs who it goes to.
Okay.
That's typically how it's done.
All right, perfect. Okay, my next question for Rachel, this is more of a buyer's question. What other inspections should I get besides a general home inspection?
So it's always great, of course, to start with a general home inspection from a reputable home inspector. I would always ask the agent, who do you know who's really good, because there's a lot of inspectors out there who are subpar. And then what happens is the home inspector will point anything else out to you. Like if they find a high moisture reading somewhere, they'll suggest you may want to get a mold expert out here. If they see the electrical panel is extremely outdated and doesn't have enough amps, they'll say you may want to get an electrician out here. So you have to really be careful and listen to what the home inspector says, and you can always ask questions. If the home inspector points out a problem, it's up to the buyer to decide whether he or she wants to have the other expert come out. And I highly recommend that. The other thing I recommend is it's really important to do sewer scopes to make sure that your sewer lines are functioning. And there's a company that will come out and they'll just send a camera into the sewer line. And someone just called me last week about this, and she's having this problem where they did one, but they didn't go far enough. And there was a tree that got into the sewer line and created a huge problem. So, that I always suggest to people. But other than that, you really listen to the home inspector and see what he or she has to say about further inspections.
Okay, and Fred, in regards for the title part of it, and when they're doing this kind of inspection, go ahead. And how does that affect?
Well, I was going to say, so I ran across, because I run the San Diego Creative Investors Association also. We have a plumber there. He'll scope your sewer lines for $75, which is pretty, a low amount to have such I'd say a very important thing done. I agree with Rachel. Unless the house is completely brand new, if it's been around for a while, I think that's really smart to do that scope check. Then as far as the title insurance, a couple of things come to mind. I want to stress this. I mentioned that a homeowner's policy of title homeowner's policy is the preferred form, but it's available to you only if you're going to live in the property. So not if you're buying investment property. And it would not be available to you if you're buying a commercial property. But if you're buying a home to live in, you should have on that contract a homeowner's title policy, right? We call it a homeowner's policy.
Okay.
Now, if you're going to buy a vacation home and you're going to spend time in a vacation home, I know in our company, Chicago Title, we can issue a homeowner's policy for that because you're going to be living in it. All right. So it typically costs a little bit more. If you're buying an investment property and you're going to get a standard owner's policy, and this is of the utmost importance, if you're going to take that property and put it into a trust or an LLC or some other entity, then you need to get an endorsement. It's called a 105.7, I believe, endorsement that will continue that coverage, because otherwise it could be looked at that you changed ownership. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Now that does not apply, and here's the good news, that does not apply if you have a homeowner's title policy, homeowner's title insurance policy, and you transfer it into a trust or an LLC that's largely the same people, all right? So in other words, husband and wife, they have an LLC, no problem. The coverage continues, you don't need that endorsement. So I think that's very important also. And I go back to the idea of finding out a little bit about the company that you're going to get this policy from. Make sure that you know who they are. And if it is a company that is an agent, so you've gone, say, with Berkshire Hathaway and they choose California Title, for example, find out which of those underwriters is going to be insuring your policy, because it's not going to be California Title. It's going to be some other underwriter.
Okay. All right. My last question for Rachel. This is more of an agent question. What are examples of things that they are responsible for disclosing?
So I think I kind of mentioned this a little bit, but if you are an agent and we all have to do here in California an agent visual inspection. So it's a little form that we walk through the property and we write down anything that we see. Now we're not experts, so we're not expected to crawl up into the attic or anything like that. But if we see that there's a scratch in the floor, we see there's a chip in the counter, anything like that, we see there's water under the sink pooling, we have to write those things down. So you want to disclose anything that you can see with your eyes, anything that a reasonable person would see walking through, not an expert, but just a reasonable person walking through the house, looking under cabinets, looking at the ceiling. Hey, I see a stain on the ceiling in this bedroom, things like that. So anything that you can see, you want to just write it down so that you've disclosed it. Also, if the seller has told you something, and maybe they didn't put it in their disclosure, first you want to point that out to them. Hey, you told me that, there was a leak in the laundry room last year and you had to redo the wall and everything in the pipe, and, you need to put that in there. I always advise people, since you know that and the seller told you that you should put that in there. Per seller, leak in laundry room in 2019, blah, blah, blah. So you're just covered either way.
Okay, I have a more related question for you. What if the square footage of the house does not match what's in the record in the county? So, and if the agent is aware of that, I mean, do they disclose that, or what would you even consider, the right one?
There was
the
just
property.
A huge lawsuit about that in Los Angeles County. And I don't know if you know, it's a multi-million-dollar home sale. And the listing agent listed the property as a certain square footage. It turns out it was, I don't remember the difference, but it was quite substantial, maybe like 1,500 square feet less or 1,000 or something. And so after he closed, he found out, well, it turned out that his agent, the buyer's agent, worked for the same brokerage, wasn't the same person, but the same brokerage as the listing agent. And so they held that brokerage responsible. So basically, this is another problem of dual agency, and that was really a dual agency lawsuit. But my point is that it says in the purchase contract that the buyer has to satisfy him or herself with anything relating to the house. If you have a reason to believe that the house is really not 3,000 square feet, maybe it feels like it's 2,000 square feet, you can have someone come out and measure the house. You can go to the city, you can go to the county, you can get documents. But also keep in mind that if you are getting a loan, an appraiser will come out, usually unless there's no appraisal, and they will measure the house. So I had a listing years ago where we actually I said to my clients, this house is much bigger than, I think it was 2,000 square feet. And we actually, before we put it on the market, we had the county, it was in Escondido, we had them come out and measure it. And it was a lot bigger than we had listed it for. So we were able to put in the listing, because it was in the process of being changed, that the house is actually larger than it says, and that this will be reflected in the records soon. But really, I would just say all you can do is you can try to get a builder brochure. You can go to the county or the city, try to get building permits. You can, depending on who built the house and where it is. I mean, it's really, the buyer has to satisfy themselves with that. And if you, like I said, if you have an appraisal, they'll measure. So if you don't, and you can't get any information from any of those other things, you can probably hire someone to independently come out and measure the house.
Okay. How does that affect title, Fred?
So title insurance, we cover the legal description of the property, right? Not the square footage. That's really an agent matter. But I will say this, 2 points on that. I think it used to be when you gave an estimate of square footage, if you were a listing agent, you put in, 2,564 square feet approximately, or estimate. The problem with that, I believe there was a lawsuit years ago where a judge said, 2,654 square feet is not an estimate. An estimate is 2,500 square feet to 2,700 square feet. That's an estimate. And I don't think people should get in the habit of relying even on county documents, because unless it was based on an appraisal or permits that showed the whole thing when it was first built, some of those can be erroneous. I mean, they can be off.
Yeah,
So I think it is important for people to get those facts, but I agree that once that appraisal's done, that appraiser, if he's halfway decent, is going to be measuring it. Now remember this, for refinances, there are drive-by appraisals, and if you're relying on one of those, that may not be the same.
Yeah. It's a valid point though, because here in North County, we have, especially North County Coastal, we have a lot of tract neighborhoods. And so in those cases, it's really easy because, you have the builder brochure and you see, this model is 2,500 square feet. This model is 2,000 square feet. But it's more so maybe out in some of the more rural areas, or the areas where there are more, homes that are not tract homes, that you might have an issue. But I think there's definitely ways, like the property I had in Escondido. I mean, we just had the county came out for free and measured for us.
Yeah,
Okay.
They came out and they measured the house and they said, you guys are right. It's, whatever, I don't remember now, but it was a lot bigger than they were told when they bought it. So they didn't have to pay the property tax difference.
Well, because the appraiser on a sale, they usually do come out, or at least update their records.
Yeah.
You bring up an important point about this. And I mentioned legal description as far as the property, the dimensions of the property should match what the legal description is, right? So it'll say something like in Coronado as an example, it might say the westerly 30 feet of the northerly 20, you know what I'm saying, is 100 feet. Or it might just say lots 1 and 2 of such and such. So you can look on those maps and then determine the dimensions. I will say it's very important, going back to what buyers should look at, is if there are any easements on the property that would affect that buyer. And an example would be, you have, here's one I know that's come out. Had a person that bought a fourplex, or put a $100,000 deposit on a fourplex, and then later because he bought that property because he felt he could put 6 ADUs on the back of it, and later found out that the sewer ran diagonally from the north east corner to the southwest corner across the property. So there was no way he was going to be able to put those 6 units on there, which really diminished the value to him of what he was going to do. So that would have been something that you'd want to know. Again, we don't, unless we're somebody is paid that they want to find out, we'll note all of the record easements that are there. And there are easements sometimes that show up, but that can be cleared because maybe they've been abandoned, say, by the county. Does that make sense?
I see. So if what you just explained, title will not be able to include that as part of the report if there was something underneath the ground that they can't build ADUs. So that's not part of the title?
Yes, it is. It is.
It will be. Okay.
It will be, as long as it's a recorded easement. Does that make
Okay,
sense?
if it's only a recorded easement, okay.
Correct. Correct.
And to further extend that, if you are a buyer and you are buying a property like that and your plan is to do something like that during your investigation period, you want to have someone come out there and tell you exactly where those lines are. Because if that's, the key to buying the property is to be able to build these ADUs, and you can't do that if you don't have, the sewer, then it's either going to cost you a fortune to redo them, or you're not.
Isn't that part of the entitlement process where they already have all that information in place before they even build the house?
Sometimes, but I would think so. But in this case, I don't know. Maybe the guy didn't have plans, and maybe he just bought the lot and didn't do enough of it. I just sold a lot. There's a lot of investigation you have to do to make sure you have all your utilities, you have sewer connected, you have what you can and can't do, where, if there are easements, if there are, where the entrance to the property can be, things like that. So
So is that the agent's responsibility for them to do all the due diligence, or is it the title, or is it coming out from the title?
Well, I'm sure Fred can answer the title, but as far as the agent, it's not, it wasn't my responsibility. My client, I offered to go, but my client went to the city and pulled a lot of permits and documents and things like that. We can always help people do that, but they have to satisfy themselves with that. And he contacted people who had built lots or bought lots nearby, and he got all his information. So, and actually the listing agent had a lot of helpful information that was provided to us as well, because the seller was the builder. Yeah, but for the title part, I don't know.
All right, I have a question for Fred. You were going to say, Fred, something. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to talk briefly about the easement. So what I recommend people do, particularly if you're a buyer's agent, buyer's going to buy the property, that the title company, if asked, will plot any easements.
Yeah.
And so you'll have a map that has colors on it that will show where these easements are. And ideally, many easements run on the perimeters of property, maybe across the back fence line or on the side, because it is where the sewer goes. But you want to see where those are, because if there is an easement that runs through the middle of that property and you look at it and go, okay, but you're not gonna be able to build.
Okay.
The title, real quick, the title in the lot I just sold, the title company was great, because they actually came out and met us there, and they walked with their little measuring, I don't know what you call the things that roll, and they made sure that the lot was what it said it was. And so that was really comforting to know that they came out there and helped us out.
We inspect most properties. Chicago Title, if it's over $1 million, typically we will send an inspector out.
Yeah.
And you had a question, Maria. I'm sorry, you had a question.
Yes, I do have a question for you, Fred. So tell me, what is the difference between title insurance company and a title agent?
Okay.
And how do I know the difference?
Okay. So I'm going to say this. Typically, if you should recognize national chains. If you have a question, ask that agent that's recommending this company, because they're typically the ones that'll say, well, here's what I recommend, correct? Ask them, is this a title insurance company or is it a title agent? And if it's a title agent, they should be informed via a affiliated business relationship. That's what typically happens. Although there are small independent companies that would be considered title agents also. Does that make sense? A number of them during the meltdown, they went out of business. There were a number of those, like World Title was one. I think Gateway Title, they're no longer in business. So it's helpful to know something about that financial strength. The simplest way, I think, is ask, is it a title insurance company, is it a title agent? And if it's a title agent, who is their underwriter?
Okay. All right. As a consumer, do I have a right to choose a title insurer that will handle my transaction?
I am going to do what Rachel did. Can you see this? Is it clear?
Here, let me do this for you. I'm going to make you spotlight here. Go ahead.
Can you read it, or is it backwards?
California Assembly Bill 957, Buyer's Choice Act.
What this basically says, and it mirrors the RESPA, which is the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act that's under HUD. What it basically says is this: a seller can't demand if there's a federally regulated loan on this property. So if the seller was doing his own financing, if it was a private money loan, what I'm saying, any conventional financing, bank, lender, and so forth, a seller can't say, you have to use this particular title company or we don't have a deal. And that happened, I know, when I first got in the business. that was not uncommon for agents to say, I'm not going to put you through offer if you keep countering back with this larger company. I want my company, right? So both on a federal level with RESPA, Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, Section 9, and this Buyer's Choice Act, which is in California, it basically says buyer has a right to choose who they want. Now, they may go along with the one the seller has, but they have a right to choose who they want. And I think, again, it goes back to having some knowledge about, well, what is this title company that I want to choose? What I'm being recommended? What is the benefit of using them? Are they a title insurance company? Are they a title agent? And if they're a title insurance company, what are the resources for them to pay claims? Because at the end of the day, if they have a claim, that company has to be around to be able to pay it.
Okay. All right. Perfect. I think we learned a lot today. I really, really appreciate you all. Let me just put back on a gallery view. So for just last advice, Rachel, what else can you share the audience about making sure that they know what they're doing, that they're disclosing everything? What else can you give them as an advice?
Yeah, I think just to recap what I said, that it's so important that you have an agent who really knows what they're doing, who's experienced, and can help walk you through so you're aware of all the timelines, deadlines, all your responsibilities under the contract, so you can avoid any liabilities, because you know, that's the only way you're going to do that, is just by being kept in the know. And similarly with selling your home, you want to just be in contact with your agent. You want to understand what your responsibilities are, what any of your deadlines are, and really stay and keep that connection, and make sure that you commit to all those responsibilities as soon as possible, and as graciously as you can when it comes to letting people access your home. And as long as you do that, and you just really understand what your role is in the transaction, and you fill out your disclosures properly, you should be fine. So stay in contact with everyone. Remember to ask questions if you don't understand something. That's super important.
Okay, great. What about you, Fred? Last advice.
Well, I would say my advice would be use a reputable agent. I think Rachel is right on target there. You a reputable agent, somebody that you have had some, either dealings with before, or good recommendations from other folks who said, hey, boy, they informed me, they kept me on top of everything. I think that's extremely important. And then clearly, from going back from the title insurance standpoint, I'm available. I tell all my clients, agents, if your clients have a question about, why do I need title insurance? Should I get a homeowner's policy? What happens if I transfer it? I try to keep everybody involved with videos. I've done some about, what I mentioned before about binders and things like that. And we could cover all kinds of stuff. So, but I think it's just important to let people know if they have a question, ask. You can call the title officer and ask a question. Now, they're not going to give legal advice, but they will answer your questions regarding, say, the prelim, what's on the prelim. Or they can call me. I'm available 24/7. You can call me anytime, evenings, weekends included.
What's your phone number, Fred?
619-507-5688.
What about you, Rachel?
760-310-9466. And same thing, I'm always available.
Okay, there you go. Well, thank you so much, Fred and Rachel. This is such an amazing educational session. I really, really appreciate your time, and I'm sure that people really appreciate it too, because this kind of information, sometimes it's not available anywhere.
Correct. Yeah.
And it's good that we're able to bring you up on Facebook. And I'm hoping that everyone will share this session, because I think it's really useful for other people to learn about it. And if you guys have any additional question, make sure that you reach out to Rachel and Fred. For Finest Women in Real Estate, we have our next session will be on March 18, and it's going to be regarding real estate development. And we have, I believe, Steve Matley, who is a real estate project manager, and we have Lisa Young, who is a real estate broker in San Diego, and she does a lot of real estate development, which is more on the commercial side of it. So this will be an interesting topic for next month. And actually, it's this month, March 18th.
That's right.
It's already March. I can't believe it. But anyway, so thank you so much, and both of you. Again, we'll try and schedule another session, and maybe touch a different topic that they can learn
Sure.
from.
Let's
Okay?
do this. This was such a pleasure again, being with you guys on the Zoom video conference. Really, just such a
Yes,
delight to see those smiles on your faces and get all this great information.
Man,
exactly.
Thank you to Finest Women in Real Estate for getting this content out there, because I just think that anything you can do to help the consumer and to help agents as well is just going to make this whole profession so much stronger and better. So thank you.
Okay.
Concur.
So make sure you guys leave comments here in Facebook and let us know what else you would like to learn from Rachel and Fred, and we will be really welcoming any suggestions that you have. All right. Well, anyway, have a great day, and we will see you again. Bye-bye.
Ready. Goodbye. Thanks, ladies. All right.